On Lucian's 60th birthday, he organized a gathering at my small restaurant, inviting his old classmates. As I wheeled in the cake, I spotted Lucian at the head table, sitting next to his first love, Sophia. "I'm not as skilled as your wife," Sophia mused, lifting a delicate hand. "I can't even do the dishes properly." Lucian chuckled. "How could she ever compare to you? You're a famous painter now, and she's just a woman past her prime." I froze in place, my hands trembling on the cake cart. My chest tightened as I overheard a hushed conversation nearby. "If my brother had married Sophia, our family would be thriving," my sister-in-law whispered. "Well, it's his own fault for being blind," my mother-in-law muttered. A surge of fury and sorrow overwhelmed me. My vision blurred, my knees gave way, and darkness swallowed me whole. Years of toil had left my body weak. As I lay on the cold floor, I heard someone whisper, "There's no rush to take her to the hospital. Even if she recovers, she'll only be a burden." Lucian said nothing. His silence was the final betrayal. This was the family I had sacrificed everything for. Rage and despair consumed me, until I awoke to find myself back in 1987, before I had ever married Lucian. To my astonishment, he seemed different. He avoided asking for money, kept his distance, and acted as if he wanted nothing to do with me. Had he been reborn too? If so, then this time, we would walk separate paths. "Why are you so late?" Lyra's mother snapped. "She'll be late for school." She stormed over, snatching the triangular bag from my grasp. One peek inside, and her face twisted in anger. She wanted buns. "Why did you bring tofu pudding? Are you brainless?" Something in me snapped. I stepped forward, reclaiming the bag from her hands. "If she doesn't like it, even better. I won't waste it on her. Not even for the dogs." Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel, climbed onto my old bicycle, and pedaled away. The cold morning air stung my tear-streaked face, but for the first time in my life, I had stood up to them. Moments ago, they had left me to die without a second thought. Now, fate had given me another chance. As memories of Lucian's birthday party resurfaced, the truth became clear. He had insisted on an extravagant event, but it wasn't for the reunion, it was for Sophia. The moment word spread that Sophia had returned, old classmates eagerly showed up. I prepared everything myself, from seafood dishes to handmade noodles, pushing my frail body to its limits. Yet when they arrived, not one person acknowledged me. I knew Lucian thought I was dull and unrefined, an embarrassment he wanted to hide. So I remained in the background. When the cake was ready, I waited at the door, watching as Lucian and Sophia sat side by side, their laughter filling the room. "Your wife owns this restaurant?" "Not bad," Sophia remarked with an elegant smile. Lucian smirked. "Compared to you? She's nothing more than an old relic." Their words cut through me like a blade. "Sophia, try this fish." "I made sure to pick one without bones," Lucian said, placing a piece onto her plate. I stared in shock. He had always despised fish bones. If I ever served him carelessly, he would scold me for hours. And yet, for her, he did it without hesitation. As I stood there, frozen, another conversation reached my ears. If my brother had married Sophia, our family would be so much better off. Well, it's his own fault for being blind. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law's voices were unmistakable. This was the family I had devoted my life to. Anger surged through me, and my vision darkened. My body, already fragile, could take no more. I collapsed. "What's wrong with her now?" my mother-in-law huffed. "Why couldn't she wait until after the party?" "Brother, what do we do?" Lyra whispered anxiously. Lucian barely glanced at me. "There's no point taking her to the hospital. Even if she wakes up, she'll just be a burden." With that, my fate was sealed. They dragged me into the break room and continued their celebration as if nothing had happened. I was found at midnight by a staff member, long after their party had ended. Without me in their way, their lives flourished. After a lifetime of servitude, I had died alone. But now, I was back in 1987. Lucian and I were still young, and I had my whole life ahead of me. I was 20 years old, running a pancake stall for 3 years since my father's tragic death. My mother was ill, my brother worked a low-paying factory job, and I had abandoned my education to support them. That was the year Lucian's family moved in next door. They wasted no time taking advantage of us. When Lucian and I started dating, not only did they stop paying rent, but they leached off me at every turn. Lucian barely scraped through high school, and when it came time for university, his family had no money for tuition. Without hesitation, I handed over my savings. And that's when everything changed. Lucian had always believed he was special, a misunderstood genius destined for greatness. But this time, I would not be his stepping stone. Whenever his career started to gain momentum, he would somehow create a problem for himself and end up right back at the beginning. If it weren't for my small business supporting his family, I couldn't imagine where they would be. Yet, they remained completely unaware of my contributions. Instead, they were convinced that I was the one holding them back. Since fate had given me a second chance, I decided to stop helping him and let him fend for himself. I returned to the market, packed up my stall, and pushed my tricycle home. The market wasn't far from my house, just a short ride away. "Are you bringing me breakfast?" Lyra whined when I entered. "It's too noisy to eat there. You know I need to eat before school." I was exhausted from the early morning rush, but still, I made time to bring food home, only to be met with complaints once again. In my past life, I must have been out of my mind to tolerate this. I pushed the cart into the yard, noticing that Lucian's family was nowhere in sight. My mother was already awake. Though she was too weak to leave her bed, she kept herself busy, sewing to help with household expenses. I fetched water for her to wash her face and set out the leftover steamed buns and tofu pudding for us to share. "Did you and Lyra argue?" she asked cautiously. "She was shouting for you just now." "No argument," I said calmly. "We broke up." She paused for a moment, then let out a small sigh of relief. "I warned you before, didn't I?" she said softly. "Lucian's family is nothing but trouble." She had been right all along. In my past life, I ignored her warnings. Later, when she fell gravely ill, all of our money had already been taken by Lucian's family. We had nothing left for her treatment. A sudden thought struck me. This time, I would not let history repeat itself. With this second chance, I had to live wisely. There was too much to process, but I needed to stay calm and plan carefully. I had a good sense for business. It was Lucian's family that had dragged me down. This time, I would seize every opportunity. Because making money was my priority. "Isabella!" Lucian's voice rang out from the yard. I walked out and saw his mother standing near the door. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my face expressionless. Looking at him now, he no longer seemed as handsome as before. Back then, I saw him through rose-colored glasses. In truth, he was just another unremarkable young man, dusty and unkempt. The only thing he had going for him was that he liked to keep clean. "Isabella, let's break up," he said. "From now on, we'll go our separate ways and stay out of each other's business." For a moment, I was stunned. Had he really just stolen my words? Seeing my silence, he smirked, as if expecting me to beg him to stay. Instead, I nodded vigorously. "All right. Let's break up. But you need to return everything you owe me. Then we'll be even." "What are you talking about?" His mother stepped forward impatiently. "Lyra, you still need tuition money. If you break up with her, where will that money come from?" she whispered urgently. Lucian shook off her grip. "Mom, don't worry. I have my ways." Then he turned back to me. "I said not to bother me anymore. I'll pay back what I owe." "I hope so," I replied. "You owe me a year's rent. 60 yuan. Pay up." His expression wavered for a second. "Fine," he muttered. "If you don't pay, move out tomorrow," I added. "All right, I'll leave tomorrow." Was he trying to play hard to get? Did he think I would chase after him? I had better things to do. I had to wake up at 3 in the morning to run my stall. Usually, after closing, I had no time to rest because I was too busy doing chores for Lucian's family. But now that I had nothing to do with them, I suddenly had plenty of free time. I went back inside and took a nap. When I woke up, I felt refreshed. Checking the time, I saw that it was already noon. I prepared a simple vegetable dish. Lucian's family was unusually quiet. Normally, I would have cooked for them, and they would come over to take the food. Now his mother peeked into our house, but when she saw I was ignoring her, she huffed and went back inside. She should take a good look in the mirror before acting so high and mighty. What did she even have to offer? I chuckled to myself. In my past life, I had been constantly manipulated by her words, always feeling like I wasn't good enough. Not this time. This time, I wanted to see what Lucian could achieve without me. After washing the dishes, I headed out. The first stall in the morning market was a small shop that had once been a courtyard house. They had knocked down the front wall to turn it into a storefront. It specialized in marinated meats. Alexander. I greeted sweetly as I entered. Alexander had been running the shop for years, but now that he was older, he wanted to return to the countryside to live with his nephew. In my past life, this was when he sold his shop. He only asked for 500 yuan, but back then that was a large sum, and my family didn't have enough to buy it. He ended up selling it to a neighbor who still owed him 100 yuan. Now, I had 400 yuan, the money I had originally saved for Lucian's tuition. Since I no longer needed it, I decided to buy the shop myself. When I told Alexander my plan, he grinned. "I've been watching you, girl. I knew you'd eventually make something of yourself." His words filled me with warmth. "All right," he continued. "You give me 400 yuan, and I'll let the remaining 100 slide." "Deal. Deal." I agreed without hesitation. Excitement bubbled inside me. This was almost too easy. Unlike that ungrateful neighbor who never paid his debt, I would honor my promises. Alexander and I went to get the paperwork notarized. Once the ownership was transferred, I returned home, triumphant. When my mother heard what I had accomplished, she was stunned. "You did all that in just one afternoon?" she asked, eyes wide with disbelief. I grinned. "This is just the beginning, Mother. Just wait and see. Why have things suddenly been going so well for you since you got rid of that mess?" I hugged my mom tightly. She was absolutely right. Letting go of that burden had changed things, but an unsettling feeling still lingered. Could it really be that easy to move on? I usually woke up early, which meant I should have gone to bed early too. But since Lucian had a habit of staying up late, I often found myself thinking about making him midnight snacks, which kept me up as well. Now that he was no longer a concern, I climbed into bed earlier than usual. Still, something gnawed at the back of my mind. His firm decision to part ways with Makudi. Could it be that he, too, had experienced some kind of rebirth? Just as I was drifting into deep sleep, a sudden cry from outside jolted me awake. Something's happened. I quickly threw on my clothes and rushed into the yard. It was midnight, a time when the town usually slept, yet people were flooding the streets. The narrow alley was filled with flickering shadows. A few children held flashlights, their beams darting around in an erratic dance. I recognized many faces, all bearing expressions of tension and urgency. "Did you hear? Henry's daughter, Sophia, was kidnapped." "What? That can't be true." "It is. Lucian, the young master from the newly moved-in family, happened to be passing by and saved her. He just brought her home." "Lucian? Which Lucian family?" "The one that recently moved here." "Why was Sophia out so late? Shouldn't she have been at home sleeping?" "She's taking night classes, so she gets home late." From the murmurs around me, I pieced together the story. And suddenly it became clear. Lucian had distanced himself from me because he had a new plan, a new path, and someone who fit his vision of an ideal future. In my past life, I had been too caught up in making ends meet to pay attention to rumors. Only now did I recall. Sophia had been kidnapped back then too, but by someone else, a college student named Rhett. He had eventually married her, and they moved to the provincial capital to build a life together. I never saw this twist coming. If Sophia was meant to be Lucian's ideal match, there was no reason for me to resent her. But only after my death had I learned that they had been secret pen pals for 30 years. Yesterday, I had brought Lucian a new cotton quilt from home. When I stepped into his house, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. His old quilt was already threadbare. Lucian's growing indifference toward me suddenly made sense. She wasn't entirely without fault in all of this, either. But now, as Lucian tried to rewrite his fate, I would stand back and watch the drama unfold. The night air carried a biting chill. As people realized Lucian had yet to leave Henry's house, they slowly started dispersing. I went home, too exhausted to care about their affairs. My thoughts were already occupied with plans for my little shop. The next morning, I skipped the market. Instead, I headed straight to my small shop to take care of business before Alexander left for his hometown. Yesterday, when I visited his house, I couldn't help but feel sentimental. As a man living alone, his quilt was old and worn, its stuffing darkened from years of use. Today, I saw that his old quilt had been neatly rolled up, ready for travel. I handed him the new quilt. "Take it." He hesitated, then unwrapped the bundle, revealing the deep red quilt cover. "I can't accept this. It's too valuable." "Is this your dowry?" "Alexander, you sold the shop to me. That's fate. Please accept this as a gift from me." This quilt had indeed been part of my dowry, a gift from my mother. But in this life, it wouldn't serve its original purpose. My only goal now was to earn money. Marriage could wait. Tears welled in Alexander's eyes as he nodded and took the quilt. Just then, a horse-drawn cart pulled up outside. His nephew had come to take him home. After seeing him off, I set to work tidying up the shop. It was a small, simple house. At the entrance stood 2 wooden tables with large bowls used for marinated meat. Behind them, a stove. Further inside, separated by a half-wall, was a kong, a traditional heated bed. I planned to reinforce the ceiling with fresh paper, repaint the walls, and clear space for my future breakfast shop. In my previous life, I had built my business up from nothing, gradually expanding it into a full-fledged restaurant. But this time, I wouldn't need 10 years to do it. Just as I was making a mental checklist, Alexander hurried back and handed me a small, dark notebook. "Child, I've thought about it, and I want you to have this treasure." I blinked in surprise. "What is it?" "I won't need it where I'm going. You're a good child. Use it well, and don't forget me when you make your fortune." With that, he turned and left. I stood frozen, then wiped my hands on my apron and opened the notebook. My heart pounded. It was a recipe. A family recipe for marinated meat. Alexander had entrusted me with his family's most valuable secret. This was something people would pay a fortune for. And I had never even dared to ask him for it. I knew my boundaries. Now, he had given it to me freely, almost as if fate had intervened. I silently vowed to honor his kindness. Whether I became wealthy or not, I wouldn't let him down. I barely had time to wipe down the shop's glass windows before rushing to gather the ingredients listed in the recipe. Among them, I even bought half a pig's head and placed it in a pot to simmer. As it cooked, the rich aroma filled the air. I could tell I was on the right track. By evening, the pig's head had softened to perfection. The shop, too, had undergone a transformation. It was already starting to feel different. "Are you opening a marinated meat shop?" A familiar voice called out. It was my elderly neighbor, a woman who loved to chat. "Yes, Grandma," I replied with a smile. "Come try this fresh pig's head and tell me what you think." I sliced a piece of the meat, wrapped it in oil paper, and handed it to her.
"Oh, I feel so bad taking this," she said, accepting it. Soon enough, I had delivered most of the pig head meat. Only then did I lock the door and think of my mom. I wanted her to have a taste too since she hadn't had meat in a while. As soon as I entered the yard, I sensed something was off. The Lucian family's door was closed, but I could hear voices coming from the window. When I walked into the house, my mom was straining to listen. She raised her finger to shush me and gestured for me to listen closely. 2 women were talking, and I could hear them clearly. One was Lyra's mom, who spoke in a flowery manner, and the other was Sophia's mom, Henry's wife. Oh wow, I really had to thank Lyra for stopping the conversation. "Don't be so polite, this is what he should do doing good deeds, right?" Lyra's mom was being overly insincere, as if she was performing. "This is $500, a token of goodwill from me and my husband, Alexander. Please buy Lyra some nutritious food to ease her nerves." So Sophia's mom was here to give money. "There's no need for that, we don't need to be so formal between our 2 families. The kids are already close as it is." Lyra's mom made that statement quite cleverly. Lucian must have prepared her for this. "Well, even though they are classmates, it's still nice to show some appreciation," Sophia's mom added, biting hard on the word classmates, as if trying to distance herself from Lucian. I found this situation amusing. It seemed Lucian wanted to follow the same path as Rhett from my past life, using the opportunity to marry Sophia. But it looked like Henry's family was not in favor of the match. Their visit to deliver money was probably to settle things. The two women exchanged pleasantries, and in the end, Sophia's mom insisted on leaving the money behind and rushed out the door. Just then, Lucian walked into the yard. I suspected he had been eavesdropping outside and was waiting for the right moment to come in. "Grace, what brings you here?" Lucian greeted me with a friendly smile. "Lyra, I came to thank you for saving Sophia. When it comes to a girl's reputation, let's keep this matter under wraps and not mention it again." Even through the window, I could see Lucian's expression change. "Does Sophia feel the same way?" "Of course, she thinks the same as us. Let's leave it at that." With that, Sophia's mom rushed out. "What do we do now?" "They're not following the usual script," Lyra's mom panicked. "Give me the money, I'll return it to them. A few bucks won't settle this." Lucian snatched the money and stormed out. "What about your tuition? You can't just give it back." Lyra's mom was shocked at the thought of losing the money and hurried after him. "You don't understand. It's better to fish for bigger ones." Lucian pushed her aside and chased after Sophia's mom. I dropped my bag on the table and told my mom, "There's some pig head meat and 2 steamed buns in there. You eat first, don't worry about me." With that, I hurried out the door. Lyra's mom was still lingering at the entrance. When she saw me coming out, she shot me a suspicious glance. She had been watching my every move. Once I stepped outside and headed in the opposite direction from Lyra, she finally retreated back into the yard. I made a big detour and arrived outside the playground of the nearby elementary school. Deep inside the playground, there was a large willow tree, thick enough to be embraced by 2 people. Its branches were lush and green. Even in winter, it never completely lost its leaves. 2 people were hiding behind it, invisible to anyone peering from the outside. This was the place mentioned in their love letters, where they often met. Sophia called it their secret hideaway. I waited outside the wall for a while when I finally heard voices. The 2 of them had arrived. "Lucian, what's going on? Didn't my mom make it clear that you should accept the money and not bring this up again?" As soon as Sophia saw Lucian, she exploded in anger. "What do you mean, Sophia?" Lucian's voice was icy, his pride wounded by Sophia's family's rejection. "Just what you heard. We shouldn't keep in touch anymore, and this matter shouldn't be mentioned again." Sophia added quickly, "If you think the money is too little, I can give you 200 more, but that's all I have." "Sophia, are you trying to buy me off?" Lucian was struggling to contain his anger and spoke as calmly as he could. "Otherwise, what do you expect me to do? What do you want?" Sophia said bluntly. "Have you considered marrying me?" Lucian finally blurted out. "Have you lost your mind? Why would I marry you? What do you have to offer?" Sophia jumped up in disbelief. "What do you mean, what do I have?" "I saved you." Lucian yelled in frustration. "Did I ask for your help? Someone else would have saved me if you hadn't. You were totally unnecessary." Sophia snapped back, but I could sense a deeper meaning in her words. Lucian, however, was clearly flustered by the anger. He didn't pick up on it and kept mulling over whether Sophia looked down on him. "Do you think I'm beneath you? Didn't you say I was your favorite?" "Shut up. When did I ever say that? Are you insane?" Sophia retreated in shock, backing away. No matter how Lucian called out, she fled in a panic. Lucian, frustrated, tugged at his hair and let out a beast-like growl. What was happening? Were the lovers not meant to be together in the end? I had a feeling Lucian wouldn't just let this go. I decided to watch how things unfolded. My mom said the pig head meat I cooked turned out fantastic, even better than Alexander's. I could imagine the old folks being stingy with their ingredients. Unlike me, I wasn't being careless at all since it was my first time cooking. The neighbors who had tried it all said it was delicious, and the next day they came looking to buy marinated meat. I woke up early to hit the morning market and brought back a big sack of ingredients. I sorted the pig head, pig trotters, pig hocks, and pig offal into large bowls, cleaned them thoroughly, and then put them in a big iron pot to start cooking. I have re-registered my business license, and the shop is now named Fuqiang Braised Meat Shop. This isn't the name I used for my restaurant in my past life, it's actually a brand of the largest chain of cooked food in the country. I hope to grow as big as they are. I was initially worried that customers wouldn't buy from me, but as soon as the braised meat was ready, it sold out instantly. I packed up early. I had already contacted the meat vendor, and they would deliver tomorrow morning, which saved me a trip and some energy. With me busy here, no one was taking care of my mom at home. I thought of a great solution. I would sell the old house, just as the Lucian family was about to move out. Once the house was sold, I'd like to see how they managed to live. Then I could buy the single-story house behind my small shop, which would allow for a front shop and a clean workspace in the back, keeping my mom close by. The shop was originally divided for sale, with the main house blocked at the back, so it got no sunlight. Living there was stifling for the owner. When I expressed interest in buying, they quickly agreed to a price that worked for both of us. I sold the old house to a neighbor uncle who had 5 sons. Once the house was settled, I lowered the price a bit, and they were overjoyed at my offer. After moving, they even picked my mom up to stay with them. When Lyra's mom heard I was selling the house, she immediately jumped in. What about us? Where are we supposed to live? I couldn't care less about where they would go. They had previously agreed to rent my house for $5 a month, but I hadn't seen a cent from them. I'd tried to kick them out, but they refused to leave. Now that the house was sold, they'd have to move eventually. I said this with complete confidence, and when Lyra's mom tried to argue, she just got scared off. The rest wasn't my concern. I just had to get everything settled and focus on living well. I ordered a wheelchair for my mom so that she could help with the front-end work during the day while someone assisted her, and we quickly got back on track. Unexpectedly, Lucian came knocking. I had closed up early, and by a little past 7, all the braised meat had sold out. I finished tidying up my stall, lowered the window shutters, and was about to lock up when Lucian asked, "What are you doing?" I jumped in surprise and shouted, "What do you want?" "I need to borrow $500, he said coldly. "I don't have any money." I pushed him back outside, but he bounced right back in. "Stop being a jerk and hand over $500. My sister is seriously ill and needs to be hospitalized." Hearing that made me remember that in my past life, around this time, Lyra had also been hospitalized with pneumonia, costing me over $300. It wiped out all my savings, which I later needed when my mom was hospitalized. "What's wrong with you? Why are you asking me for money? I'm not lending you anything. Are you going to rob me now?" I raised my voice, knowing he usually wouldn't dare to lay a hand on me. But I worried that a cornered dog might jump the fence and get violent. "I don't want to get into it with you. This is your fault. If you hadn't kicked us out, we wouldn't be living on the streets, and my sister wouldn't be sick. Of course, I'm coming to you for money." Since he wasn't leaving, I walked to the door, pushed it open, and reasoned with him. "Are you out of your mind? You rented my house and didn't pay the rent. Now that I've sold the place, you're mad that I didn't arrange a new place for you? Am I your mother or your grandmother? What do I owe you?" People have a natural tendency to gossip. As we argued inside, some neighbors had already gathered outside. Now that it had escalated to the door, a crowd started to form. In those days, there weren't many sources of entertainment, and very few families had televisions. With bellies full and nothing else to do, everyone came to see the spectacle. The neighbors were somewhat familiar with the drama involving Lucian's family. The uncle who had moved out had tried to drag things out a little longer, only to be physically tossed out, with his belongings scattered all over the place. Seeing Lucian causing a fuss today made everyone chuckle. Never seen anything like this. He won't pay rent, yet he's trying to stick it to someone else. Lucian cared a lot about his pride, so he came in wanting to borrow money. But when I ignored his dignity and brought the fight outside, he turned red with anger. "This is your good deed? Do you have no conscience? My sister is sick, and you won't lend me money? How is that a lack of conscience? Am I supposed to feel guilty for not asking you for rent? Lucian, what exactly do you mean by this? Money? Why should I?" I knew he was eager to distance himself from me, and when I pressed him like that, he hesitated for a long while before storming off, annoyed. Everyone laughed and then dispersed. I wanted to see how Lucian's family would manage without my support during this crisis. As I expected, Lyra didn't pull through and ended up with brain damage, her mental capacity regressing to that of a 3-year-old. All she remembered were her basic needs for food and drink. Now, Lucian's family was living in a new, rented place that was nowhere near the conditions of my family's old home, low and drafty. Seeing Lyra like this caused her mom to have a stroke out of worry. Have you lost your mind? You had a devoted girl following you around, and you had to aim higher. Now that you've missed your chance, let's see how you manage. Lyra's mom pointed at Lyra and scolded Lucian. Of course, Lucian couldn't swallow that insult. In a fit of anger, he went back to Sophia. This time, whatever he said must have worked because Henry's family suddenly agreed to their marriage and even helped them find a house. The neighbors were buzzing with gossip, speculating about why the Henry family suddenly changed their minds. The wedding preparations were happening right on this street, and I watched as Lyra's mom went back and forth, full of energy and vitality. Sometimes I'd see Lucian and Sophia together. Lucian had that air of a small man who finally felt important, intentionally walking a bit slower past my shop so I could get a good look. Meanwhile, Sophia looked sickly and lacked any spirit. How could these two, who had such an insurmountable mountain between them, suddenly be getting what they wanted? Shouldn't she be happy to marry her ideal man? Then, during some neighborly chit-chat, I overheard the secret: Sophia was pregnant. In those days, an unwed pregnancy was a huge deal, and it seemed that was why Henry had quickly agreed to the marriage. But based on what I'd eavesdropped about their secret meetings, Sophia didn't seem to want to marry Lucian. How could she be having his child? Did they have a child in my past life? The wedding came together quickly. Lucian wore a blue wool coat while Sophia donned a red wool suit. The suit was a fishtail design that highlighted her prominent belly, drawing everyone's eyes to it. Henry and Sophia's mom were clearly not in high spirits during the toasts, while Lyra's mom was hyperactive, bouncing around like she was on adrenaline. Lyra was also causing chaos, directly grabbing a pork elbow to gnaw on, then using Sophia's skirt to wipe her hands. Sophia, visibly irritated, pushed Lyra down. Lyra burst into tears, and no amount of soothing worked. Lucian's face was frozen in a forced smile, trying to maintain appearances. This was all secondhand from the neighbors, so I didn't know how true it was. I wasn't in the mood to deal with them. I took my mom to the hospital for checkups, ensuring her health was my priority. Perhaps it was the luck that came with the new name. My little shop was thriving, and I quickly opened a branch. Lucian was also doing well, thanks to his father-in-law's support, getting a position in the office and writing documents. He had a way with words and soon felt right at home, enjoying a good life. However, Sophia seemed to have changed completely. In my past life, she had lived a comfortable life, always studying art and taking courses after starting work, eventually gaining fame for one of her paintings. But in this life, she seemed like a different person. Not long after getting married, she began to show, and she looked as disheveled as a middle-aged woman. Occasionally, when they walked together, they looked like they were from two different worlds. One day, I was at the new shop I had just bought, getting ready to renovate it, when they walked by. Sophia looked like she was about to give birth. Her nose was swollen and red, and her face was quite unattractive. She was walking slowly, supporting herself with her hands on her waist, while Lucian pushed a bicycle beside her, glancing at her with disdain. "Could you walk a little faster?" Lucian urged. "I can't move. Call me a taxi." Sophia snapped, irritated. Taxis were rare in those days, and not every street had them available. It seemed they were headed to the hospital. I heard from the neighbors that after Sophia got married, she wasn't getting along with her parents. It looked like they weren't willing to take care of her anymore. "Where am I supposed to call from?" "If you want to go, just go," Lucian replied, pretending to get on his bike. He had treated me the same way in my past life, lacking any patience or concern when I was sick, acting as if he didn't see me. I never thought that now it was Sophia who had to endure all this. Lucian. You stop right there. Don't forget who gave you everything today. Sophia shouted in frustration. I earned everything myself. Who gave it to me? Lucian's face darkened as he stepped back, then seized Sophia's arm tightly, dragging her forward. Sophia winced in pain and nearly fell, shaking off his grip and glaring at him. Why do you treat me like this? Why must you marry me? Didn't you just say that everything I have is because of you? If that's the case, why should I marry you? He clearly had no intention of pretending anymore. Fine. You've finally told the truth. You ungrateful wretch. You've ruined my life. Sophia was so enraged that she spat blood and lunged to slap him, but he dodged, causing her to fall to the ground, groaning loudly, blood seeping from under her. Just wait. I'm going to the hospital to get an ambulance. Lucian shockingly rode away on his bike. Suddenly, thunder rumbled, and a torrential rain began to pour, drenching Sophia to the bone in an instant. I stood by the window, watching with no pity at all, just staring. Lucian. May you die a terrible death. I hate you. Sophia's curses echoed in the rain. I had just bought a new big mobile phone, sitting in my bag, but I had no intention of calling her an ambulance. Why should I meddle in her affairs? In my previous life, when I was barely hanging on, hadn't she just watched without calling for help? In the end, Sophia didn't wait for Lucian and was taken to the hospital by bystanders who couldn't bear to watch. She miscarried and lost the baby, also developing a high fever from an infection. Although Henry and his wife had their grievances with their daughter, when she fell seriously ill, their parental love awakened. They stayed by Sophia's bedside, scolding Lucian when he finally showed up late. The first thing Sophia wanted when she woke up was to divorce Lucian. Her heart was shattered. Lyra's mom created a scene at the hospital twice, further solidifying the Henry family's determination to see them divorced. Eventually, Lucian couldn't stand against them and went to the Civil Affairs Bureau with them. I had thought Henry wouldn't be too harsh, at least he would save some face. But it wasn't long before they dismissed Lucian from the office, citing his qualifications as inadequate. Lucian was someone who cared deeply about his reputation, and he couldn't take that humiliation. He stormed into the Henry home and caused a scene with them, but Sophia wasn't home, so she narrowly escaped. The day of his eviction happened to be the grand opening of my 6th branch. I was standing at the door to cut the ribbon. Just as I finished with the firecrackers, I heard someone shout that the car procession was arriving. I was momentarily stunned before I noticed the fully armed convoy approaching. Suddenly, I felt a pair of eyes staring intensely at me. Looking up, I met Lucian's gaze. He seemed like a different person after just a few months. The youthful face that once radiated vitality was now ashen, aging him by at least 10 years. As for me, I was wearing a white dress, my long black hair cascading down, radiating energy and enthusiasm. My career was just beginning, and the road ahead was still long. Isabella, look over here. A reporter waved a camera in my direction, and I smiled sweetly, freezing the moment in time. Just then, Lyra squeezed through the crowd, grinning as she chased after a truck. Lyra's mom was calling after her while trying to catch up but suddenly stopped, collapsing straight to the ground, completely motionless. From that point on, Lucian's family exited my life. In the busyness of it all, I almost forgot the events of my past life. I had been given a new lease on life and was focused on moving forward. But I forgot that one person was still alive, Sophia. You wouldn't believe it, but I had also been reborn. Not long after you died in my last life, I had a car accident while dating Lucian, and we both came back to life. Now, she and I had swapped lives. She had become despondent and aged, while I was vibrant and full of energy. After being reborn, you still ended up like this? I feigned surprise, asking. Well, I can only blame Lucian. Sophia replied through gritted teeth. It should have been Red who saved me that day, but he stole my love and ended up killing both my child and my parents. So that's what happened, the child wasn't Lucian's. Suddenly, I understood why Henry had abruptly agreed to their marriage. Lucian had hesitated to call an ambulance, intending for Sophia to miscarry. These people were truly calculating. "So why did you come to me?" I asked, worried out I can't do much anymore, my time is limited. "I just wanted to tell you that I'll go after him, and in every life, I won't let him go," Sophia said as she left, sending a chill down my spine. I realized that Lucian's future wouldn't be easy from now on. It was the same in every life. In their past life, they had spent 30 years as lovers, but now that they had truly become partners, all their love had been drained away. This is the nature of humanity, I suppose.